What is up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. This is Operation Smarty Pants, where our mission is to acquire knowledge and expand our minds. I am your host, Special Agent Ray, and today we are going to be talking about what your nose knows. Bump, 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 but no, but no, knows. All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Please stick around to the end of the podcast for some shout outs from last week's episode. But we are going to get right into it right now. So this week I watched a documentary called What is Life Like Without Smells? This documentary is available for free on YouTube by a channel called DW Documentary. They are based in Germany, and I was just scrolling through their catalog. They have a ton of interesting subjects, stuff that I've never even thought about before or heard of before. So we'll probably be doing more podcasts based on what we've learned from some of their videos. And today I wanted to start with this one because it's all about smell. It's all about the nose and how much smell or lack thereof can affect us in our daily lives. And one reason why I chose this documentary is because I love to smell things. The scent is probably one of my favorite senses, or one of my favorite ways to experience the world is through scent. I feel like I am very sensitive to it. I love the smell of candles, even when they're not burning. I love the smell of food. I once asked my boyfriend if I could smell his dessert because he had some sort of ice cream and cake and it just looked so delicious. And at that time, I couldn't eat it. I was on a strict diet, so I wanted to smell it instead, just to kind of, get some part of the taste into my body via smell. If I couldn't put it in my mouth, I wanted to at least inhale it and experience it that way, and he thought that that was super weird, but that's just me. So I was really interested to learn more about it and see if that could even explain to me why I love smell so much, and it did. Some of the stuff I already knew, some of the stuff was news to me, so we are going to get into it. We're going to talk about a couple of case studies. Oh, sorry, that was my chair squeaking. We're going to talk about a couple of case studies that were presented in this documentary. 3 different women who live in Germany. Everyone in this documentary was from Germany. So again, it was just interesting to see just a whole another country, a whole another population, their perspective on how they approach things, how it's similar, how it's different than myself, at least here in the US. So we're going to look at a couple of case studies on people who have either never had smell or have lost their sense of smell. And then at the end, after that, we'll talk about some of the more scientific reasons behind smell and why it's important and what it does for us. So one of the women, her name was Laura. She had no sense of smell since birth. So her olfactory bulb, the part of your brain that processes sense, didn't even develop. So she doesn't know, she doesn't even have anything to compare it to. She doesn't know about smell at all, a bad versus a good smell. She said that she doesn't even know how to conceptualize it or think about it, what smell would be like. She found out that she couldn't smell when she was 13 years old. That's pretty old. That's over 10 years. You're a teenager, so you've gone your whole life missing this one specific scent and you didn't even know it. I mean, of course, she didn't know it because she didn't know what life is like with smells. She didn't have anything to compare it to. I'm sure she thought that whatever her experience was normal because you don't know anything else. No one has ever told you anything different. And I think that gets a lot of people sometimes when you have an experience and it's unique to you, but because it's all you've known, then you just think that that's normal. You think everybody goes through that, and you find out later on in life that it's different. I can't think of a good example right now, but I'm sure you know what I mean. But anyways, Laura didn't know that she couldn't smell until she was 13 years old in her chemistry class, and they were doing experiments, and she had a very strong acid, and she had to like fully put it up to her nose, and she was trying to smell it when all of the other kids were staying feet away, wouldn't get near it at all, were having a reaction to it. She had no reaction. She was trying to smell it, and she couldn't. So her teacher reached out to her mom. Her mom took her to get tested, and they found out that she couldn't smell at all, which is called anosmia. I think it's kind of funny that it sounds like no nose, like anosmia, because like when you say something is, when you put a as a suffix in front of something, it usually means not. So like abnormal is not normal. Anosmia sounds like no nose. So she has anosmia, and it's definitely affected her throughout her life. She said that it is difficult in the kitchen when she's cooking to tell when food has gone bad because she can't smell it. She can't smell if something is rotten or rancid or has spoiled. Sometimes things smell bad, but they look fine. She thought it looks fine. She can't tell otherwise. So she said that when she first moved out to live on her own, she did have stomach problems because she would eat food that had gone bad, but she didn't know. She didn't know. She was describing some of what she experienced when she ate. She talked about how pears to her are sweet. She can tell that something is sweet, and we'll get into that because people, even though they can't smell, some of their taste buds still, like taste and smell is different. They come together when you have both of them, but separately they still do their own things. So she could identify that a pear is sweet, but it doesn't necessarily taste like a pear. She can't differentiate it between other fruits that are also sweet in terms of taste. So she can tell that it's sweet and that it has a firm texture, but that's about it. And again, we're going to go into why smell and taste are so closely interconnected and why losing your smell affects your taste as well. So because she couldn't smell, she cannot taste very well. She said that she learned a lot of seasoning from her mom's direction, not her own experience, because she also can't taste things that are different in terms of salty. So what am I trying to say? I think I was trying to say spicy and saucy at the same time. In terms of spicy, in terms of bitter, things like that. She actually, within this documentary, she actually took cooking classes, a specific cooking course for people who couldn't smell. And she really enjoyed doing that. She said that learning some of the theory of cooking helped her to be able to learn how to make better food for herself. And of course, when she was learning how to cook from this course, they weren't talking about taste or spice or seasoning or whatnot, but they were looking at taste, like basic taste, temperature, whether or not something had heat or was spicy, and tactility, the way that it like felt in your hands. So she's lived a very different, very interesting life, not being able to smell. And I kind of feel bad for her, again, because I love smells, and that's a really sucky thing to not experience. But I mean, maybe the fact that she never knew what smelling was like, so she doesn't know what she's missing out on, maybe that's okay. There's another woman who does know what she's missing out on. Her name is Sandra. She fully lost her sense of smell in 2021 after getting coronavirus. Now, I'm sure lots of you out there who are listening have had coronavirus or know someone who has and may have felt yourself or been described that people do lose their sense of taste and their sense of smell while they are sick with COVID, and even for a couple of weeks after that. For myself, I lost my sense of smell and sense of taste when I had COVID back in late 2020, and it sucked. I'll tell you straight up, it sucked. I was very disappointed for those, I think about a month. It took like a whole month for me to get my sense of smell back. I'm really glad that it did come back. I didn't even know that, at the time, I didn't know that it was possible for people to fully lose their sense of smell. So thank God I didn't have to go through that. But Sandra did. And She said that that really affected her mental state. I mean, it's a whole way of experiencing the world that you're now missing out on. I mean, of course, that's going to suck. That's certainly going to suck. So Sandra actually went to a specific clinic in Dresden, at Dresden University, called the Smell and Taste Clinic. So it's a group of doctors and researchers, specifically people who are studying smells, or like ear, nose, and throat doctors. And they do study those systems, and they help people to overcome them if they do have any sort of loss, or something happens where they can't smell or can't taste or whatnot. And so Sandra actually went to this clinic to try and get some help, and they did put her through a specific kind of training called olfactory training. Olfactory refers to your smell, I believe. Okay, yes, olfactory refers to anything related to your sense of smell. So there's a specific type of training that she went through, which is basically every single day she had to sit and smell specific smells in specific bottles, and she knew what those smells were, and she would tell herself, this is this smell, and really try and breathe it in and feel it and turn on the cells in her nose that receive smell input and smell information, and try and rebuild those connections from the thing in her hand to her nose to her brain. And after about 3 months, she saw a very small amount of improvement. And it wasn't even improvement that she could detect, but she went into the clinic and did the testing again, and they told her, you have some improvement. So after 3 months, it was minusculely better. They said that it takes 9 to 12 months to fully see results. So a whole year to even start to really see results of getting your sense of smell back. That's rough. There is one other woman that was looked at in this documentary. Her name is Lisa Horn. She also got COVID in 2021, and she didn't lose her sense of smell, but she did develop what is called parosmia, which is a distorted sense of smell. So she can smell, but she'll smell something and her nose and brain will interpret it as something bad or something negative, or just something different, or something confusing, which then in turn the brain will interpret as bad and say, oh, I don't know what that is. We maybe shouldn't eat it if I can't, this is your brain. We talked about your brain in a previous set of podcasts. Go check those out. But your brain and the way your brain communicates to you, like sometimes it acts as a separate entity. So even though she wants to eat these delicious foods that were good before, she knows she likes them, but the smell and the taste of them affects her brain in such a way that the brain says, I don't know what that is. This is confusing to me. Let's not eat it. Those taste bad. And it just basically tells you these taste bad. So she was dealing with this aversion to almost everything. She said she couldn't eat or brush her teeth. She said that she spent a lot of time out in nature because nature and the fresh air and the trees and everything had a very neutral smell. So she could stand to be out there. She said that's where she would go to escape daily life. And during this time, while she was dealing with this parosmia, she became pregnant and was going to have a baby. And which means if you're pregnant, you're feeding 2 people at that point. You gotta eat, girl. You gotta eat some food. So she said she literally had to force herself to eat, to go one bite at a time, to know it was gonna taste bad, and to just force herself to do it and to get through it for the sake of her health and her baby's health. Which, I mean, kudos to her. That's amazing. I know that, I haven't experienced myself, but I know that as a woman, becoming pregnant is a very big deal, and that there's a lot of growth that you go through. And once you have this other life that is dependent on you, then the things that you are capable of expand in order to be able to protect and keep this other life, this baby that you have inside of you or in your arms, keep them healthy and keep them well, and you will sacrifice yourself in order to do that. So even though her brain is telling her this tastes bad, we don't want this, she is pushing past that in order to eat, to keep herself and her baby alive and healthy, which I think is amazing. And she said that about 1.5 years later, she is about 85% better or back to normal. So she was able to sort of retrain her sense of smell in order to be able to eat normally and live a normal life. Woof. I mean, can you imagine? That's crazy. That's crazy. I love to eat. I love to smell. I love to eat. I love the way food tastes. I could not imagine having something affect me to that point where I don't want to eat anymore. I mean, I hope that never happens to me. Anyways, so why is all of this so important? Why did these 3 women undergo such an extreme amount of negative experiences because of losing their smell or never having it or changing it in the first place? Why does it affect them this much? I mean, you would think that it's just your sense of smell. You don't need it to see the world around you. You don't need it to hear. I mean, the other senses are so important. I feel like sometimes smell is kind of pushed away as well, you could survive without it. You could live without it. You could be a relatively normal human being without it. Whereas if you lose your eyes, then you're blind. If you lose your hearing, then you're deaf, and that's a major disability. But losing your sense of smell is a disability to some degree. There are risks and dangers involved with it. We're going to get into it. So let's talk some science now. Let's be specific. How does smells work? How does it work when you take a big inhale through your nose and you get a smell of something and it goes to your brain interprets it, what is happening in there? So when you inhale something specific, you're trying to smell something, odor molecules enter your nose, actual physical molecules. So this means that even when you're smelling something good or smelling something bad, there are actual physical tiny little particles that are going into your nose in order to communicate to your brain. So they hit what is called your olfactory mucosa in your nasal cavity. And your olfactory mucosa has millions of olfactory cells on it. It says 6 to 30 million. That's what the documentary said. That's a very big spread, I feel like. Like if you only have 6 million, does that change your smell at all rather than having 30 million? Or does it not matter? As long as you have at least 6 million, you're good. I don't know. But they have cells on your olfactory mucosa. These are olfactory cells, basically smelling cells. And each cell has over 400 specific odor receptors that are keyed to different molecules. So think of it as if you have like a wooden board that has a star shape cut out and a square shape cut out and a diamond shape cut out. There's 400 different shapes, specific shapes that are on each cell in this olfactory mucosa in your nasal cavity. And so each different smell, whether it's a good smell, a bad smell, a neutral smell, whatever, spicy, floral, sweet, each type of smell has different molecules that enters those specific receptors in different combinations. So for example, smelling a rose, I'm going to very much simplify this, but let's say we have like a star, a diamond, a heart, and a square, and those are the different receptors. And if you're smelling a rose, it smells like a star and a heart. But then if you're going to smell like cooking meat, then that's a square and a diamond, and sometimes they'll overlap. So for example, like let's say you're going to smell I'm looking around trying to see if there's anything that will inspire this example. Let's say you're going to smell a lemon, and that's kind of sharp and tangy and sweet. So that might be a heart and a square. Again, for example, so each scent has a different pattern. And I mean, with 400 different individual receptors, you have thousands upon millions upon, I don't know statistics, but however many different combinations of different smells. And so those specific combinations hit your olfactory cells, which are then picked up by your olfactory bulb. And so that's the thing that Laura did not even develop. So you have the olfactory bulb, which connects to your brain. And then so that's how the physical smell in front of you gets communicated into your nose and then into your brain. And so for Sandra, who lost her smell after coronavirus, that's because the virus attacks supporting cells in your olfactory mucosa. So the part of your nose that first gets those smell molecules, they have other cells in there, supporting cells, not the specific olfactory cells, but there are supporting cells in your olfactory mucosa. And when the virus attacks those cells, then the inflammation from that attack will kill your actual olfactory cells. And they do regenerate. It said in the documentary that your olfactory cells do replace and regenerate themselves. But of course, like with COVID, I guess there's a chance that the virus can be so strong that maybe it just completely kills all the cells in your olfactory mucosa and kills their ability to regenerate. It said in the documentary that there's at least over 100,000 people that still can't smell after being infected with coronavirus. It also said in the documentary that about 20% of people have some sort of olfactory disorder. So whether that is, like we talked about, anosmia or parosmia. There was also one other type of disorder that they mentioned that I just forgot to write down. So this isn't a completely crazy rare thing to have an issue with smell. About 1 in 5 people have some sort of disorder with it. So it happens, it's out there. And now we're going to talk about why it is a big deal. How much of a part does smell play in our life, in our daily life, in the decisions that we make, in our emotions and our memories? We're going to get into it. So first of all, your smell is a type of alarm system that can and does alert you to danger. Like we talked about with Laura, for her, it was difficult to tell when food had gone bad. That's a very big one, is that smell is one of the main ways that we can tell if food has gone bad. I mean, think about it. If you open your refrigerator and you get a whiff of something weird, you know immediately something is rotten away in that fridge. And you're gonna go and you're gonna look for it and you're gonna throw it out. That is your smell alerting you to danger, basically saying you're in danger of eating something bad and your entire food supply is in danger, because if you have one rotten something, that can spread and create other rotten somethings, and then you're hungry, then you don't have anything to eat. So smell is an alarm system, not only for food, but for other types of environmental hazards. For example, fires. I don't know about you, but I spent a lot of time in California growing up, and California was prone to fires and wildfires. And I remember walking out of the movie theater and you would smell it in the air. You could smell that hot burning smell, that acrid, you're like, oh, that's a fire. And not just oh, someone's got a little cook fire going on, but that's a dangerous wildfire. Even if you couldn't see it, you can smell it, and it's somewhere. And it was miles away. The fires were miles away when I could smell them, but I know that they're there, and that was a signal to get out. So fire is one example of how we can use smell to detect it and keep us safe. Another is gas. I mean, I think a lot of us know what gas smells like. And if your home is filling up with gas, that is super dangerous. And if you can't smell, then you're not going to know if your home is maybe filling up with gas. So that and any other type of weird smell, like if you're going anywhere and something smells weird, you're probably not going to keep going. It's usually a pretty good indicator that something is wrong. So that is something that people who can't smell really have to look out for, is dangers like that. And again, dangers that they have no other way of perceiving unless it's right there in front of them. Another thing to look out for when you can't smell, and seems a little more trivial than the previous example, but of course you don't know what you smell like. So if you're working out, if you're exercising and you get smelly, you don't know. You can't smell yourself. Like, I just smelled myself, and yeah, I know what I smell like. I did go for a walk before I recorded this, and I can tell. But people, it's summer, it's hot. People who can't smell, then they don't know what they smell like. So that's not a danger necessarily, but that then becomes something that you do have to worry about. Something that you do have to worry about, and something you have to constantly be aware of. Well, you don't have to be, but I'm sure most people are going to be, because most people, want to smell good just for themselves and in, mixed company. And so it's just another thing that's just on your mind, That's an extra thing that you have to constantly be thinking about and worrying about to some degree, that people who can smell, as long as they smell themselves and they smell good, then they just, put it out of their heads, and they'll worry about it when they do get, a bad stink from their own body. Okay, so that is some of the outside stuff that can affect us in terms of other people, in terms of our environment. Let's talk about something a little more personal. So smell and taste are connected. Smell and taste are very much connected. Again, with Corona, if you lost your sense of smell, you probably also lost your sense of taste. I know I did. I couldn't taste anything. Things didn't taste good. They just tasted like food, from what I remember. And some things would taste, you eat meat, it sort of tastes like meat, and I had ice cream, but it didn't taste like ice cream. It just tasted kind of cold and sweet, So taste and smell are connected. This is because your nose and your mouth and your throat are all connected. It's like one open tube. So what you're getting in terms of flavor when you eat is mostly about 80% of the taste and the flavor of something is the aroma of the food going up the back of your throat and hitting your olfactory system. So that's, like we said before, those odor molecules from the food that you're eating are going up the back of your throat when they're in your mouth, hitting that olfactory mucosa, hitting those olfactory cells and the receptors on them, and then going into your brain, and your brain says, oh, this tastes like this. So that's why smell and taste are so deeply connected. Your tongue can taste some things, but they are more general and more categorical. So for example, all your tongue can really interpret is sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. Umami is like savory, basically. So sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. Your tongue can get those categories of flavors. I don't even want to say flavors, because those aren't flavors. Those are just like experiences. I don't know. I guess it's taste. I guess it's flavors. But again, those are the umbrella terms for thousands and thousands of other flavors that can go underneath each one. Like, each kind of food can get categorized into sweet, salty, sour, bitter, or umami, but those foods have their own individual tastes and flavors within that category. Does that make sense? Are you guys picking up what I'm putting down? You understand what I'm saying? So that's why Laura said that when she ate a pear, she can tell that the texture is firm compared to other fruits, and she can tell that it is sweet, but she's not getting that specific pear flavor. So that is how your smell and your taste are connected. And again, if you lose that sense of smell, then you also lose a large degree. Again, 80% of taste is smell, comes from what you're smelling. So if you lose the ability to smell, then you lose out on a really big part of the eating experience, which again, in my opinion, sucks. Sucks a lot. Okay, let's talk about a couple more ways that smell is important to us. So this is more relational. in terms of other people, but sometimes, and a lot of the times, and whether we are conscious of this or not, when we choose a romantic partner, it can often be based on smell. Or, I mean, it's not, of course, fully based on smell, but the way that your partner smells to you is a really big factor of your compatibility when it comes to genetics and biological makeup. So, when you choose a partner, someone to procreate and have children with, ideally, you want your child to be the best of both of you, right? You want to pass down your best traits to your child, and your partner does the same thing. And this child has taken on both the positive and beneficial parts of each of their parents, so that they are, stronger than their parents individually. I hope that makes sense. Here's a little more details. So, genetically, you want to choose a partner who has opposite genetic strengths than you do. For example, let's say that we'll talk about me. Let's say that I am allergic to grass. When I go outside and when I sit in the grass or roll around in the grass, I get itchy, I get hivey, I might even get like a stuffy nose. So there's something in me that's allergic to the grass. Ideally, I would want to choose a partner who is not allergic to grass and who has a strong resistance to grass, so that they would pass down their strength and their resistance to our child. That would hopefully be the dominant trait. And then even if I pass down my allergy, then the dominant trait of being resistant to it is what will prevail, and our child will not be allergic to grass. Does that make sense? So that goes for the whole spectrum of your genetic predispositions. The things that you are weak to, you want someone who is strong to. And the things that you are strong to, you want someone, ideally who is strong to it as well, but if they are weak to it, then your strength will trump their weakness, so that ideally your child is just getting the strongest parts of both parents. And so how this ties into smell and scent is that someone who smells good to you has an opposite genetic makeup. They are strong to the things you are weak to, and they are weak to the things that you are strong to. And that can, and I think should, play a part in choosing a long-term partner and choosing someone that you have a family with, because ideally you would want your child to be the strongest and best parts of both of you. Like, for example, I had a boyfriend in high school who didn't smell good to me at all. And I remember noticing that, and I kind of wondered why, but I didn't really think too much of it. I didn't know all of this stuff at the time, and I just kind of set it aside and was like, okay, well, maybe this is just a one weird thing. I don't know. We broke up for other reasons other than smell, but I remember, I kind of filed that away in the back of my head. Fast forward to now, my current boyfriend and my life partner, he smells amazing. He smells great to me. I could smell him all day. And so after now learning all of this, I know that that is a good thing, and that means that we are a good genetic match. In the documentary, they call it heterogeneous. So there you go. We are heterogeneous. He is heterogeneous to me. I don't know exactly how to use it, but he smells good, which means that our children will get the best of both of us, and will ideally have all of our genetic strengths combined and none of our genetic weaknesses. So when you can't smell, then you're sort of losing out on one tool at your disposal when it comes to choosing a partner. Of course, there are so many other things that matter more than how a person smells to you, but I do think that how they smell should matter to some degree. And that was something that Laura, again, who had never been able to smell at all, something that she was, sort of worried about, but I mean, she is married now, even though she doesn't know what her husband smells like. They are still, of course, a happy couple. I don't think they have any kids, but hopefully someday they will, and hopefully someday her kids will come out strong and healthy, and hopefully they can smell. Okay, we've got one more little topic to go into, and then I'll share something personal about myself and smell at the very end here. So it just kind of came to me as I was recording this now. Okay, but let's talk about smell in terms of memories and emotions. Maybe you've experienced this, but we can have very strong sense memories tied to different smells. And I mean emotions as well, but they talked about it just more in terms of memories here. I mean, I've certainly experienced this where I'm just out randomly and I'll get a random smell from a restaurant or even a person walking by, the specific type of perfume or cologne that they're wearing, and I'm just overwhelmed by this. Sometimes I can't even put a specific memory to it, but it's just a sense, it's a feeling, it's nostalgia, it's emotion, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but you feel something rush up inside of you. And again, it's hard to even vocalize or to speak about because it's not tangible, it's not a specific idea or a specific memory, it's like a concept of a memory, something like that gets triggered when you smell something specific. Like even just the other day, I walked into an elevator and the person who had been in there before was wearing some sort of perfume, and it smelled like a perfume that I used to wear when I was a kid. So even just getting into that elevator and smelling that smell brings back this memory, this feeling of being a kid. And again, there's nothing specific there, but it's just this amorphous something that I'm trying to latch onto. They said in the documentary that the smell of vanilla is very good and very popular and very warming and comforting and used a lot and widely accepted to be a good smell because there is a compound called vanillin in breast milk. And so the smell of vanilla, maybe to some degree, brings us back to the feeling of being small and warm and comforted against our mother's chest. Even though we don't know that consciously, we still have that deep, deep subconscious memory attached to that smell. So why are these memories and emotions so closely tied up with smell? Well, it has to do with your limbic system. And your limbic system is a very complicated structure inside your brain that does deal with emotions and memories. And so what happens is that when you smell something, the information goes into your olfactory bulb, and straight from there it goes straight to your amygdala, which deals with emotions, and your hippocampus, which deals with memory. So this sense has a direct line to the parts of your brain that deal with emotions and memory. And so it's very easy for any sort of associations to come to the forefront of your mind. And the reason this doesn't happen with other senses, for example, is that sight and hearing and taste, all that sensory information goes to your thalamus first. And your thalamus is another part of your brain that then translates the information and sorts it and then sends it off to other appropriate areas for it to be fully processed and integrated and recognized. But your scent doesn't go through the thalamus. It just goes straight to your amygdala and your memory. So that is why these senses and emotions and memories are all tied up together, and why something like that can surprise you. And that's also why people have such strong memories to specific smells. And a lot of the times people know that, like people who were in houses with people who smoked cigarettes, that has a very specific smell. And so that those sorts of feelings, whatever sorts of emotions or memories they have associated with that person or that situation, then they carry that with them, throughout the rest of their life. And I mean, I'm sure, like, if I tell you, what does your grandmother's house smell like? You may not be able to describe it specifically, but there is a certain smell associated with your grandmother's or your grandfather's house, I'm sure. And even though you can't maybe describe it, you can probably recall it to some degree. And I bet if you went back there and walked through the door and smelled that smell, you would be overcome with all the memories and emotions from hopefully a very happy childhood visiting your grandparents. So I think all of that is super interesting. I mean, I knew I liked this scent of smelling or scents. I knew I liked smelling, the sense of smelling, but I didn't know exactly how integrated it is to our human experience and how important it is to sometimes our health and survival. So this was super interesting. And I want to end with a mystery of my own when it comes to smell. And I don't know, hopefully someone out there listening can maybe tell me what the heck is going on here. But I used to get phantom smells, and they would last for weeks, if not months. And then they would go away. And then they would come back, like the next year. The exact same smell would come back, and I would smell it all the time. I would be sitting there just breathing in and out through my nose, and I could smell it. I could smell something. And I had never smelled it before. I didn't have any other kind of association with it, if it smells like this or it smells whatever. It was just, I would say, like, there's a smell inside my nose, and it was just sitting there hanging out. And I would smell it for months, and then it would go away, it would disappear. And with no warning, with no trigger, nothing that I could, looking back or at the time, nothing that I could identify as a trigger. And then sometimes it would come back the next year. Sometimes it would skip a year. Sometimes I feel like it would come back around the same time, like spring or summer-ish. And there was, sometimes has gone like a couple of years and I forgot about it. And then it comes back and I'm like, oh, this is that smell that I used to smell. And I haven't had it in at least maybe the last like 3 years. I feel like I fairly recently I had smelled it. I had it, that experience. And then it disappeared and it hasn't come back in at least a couple of years. So I don't know. I don't know what that is. I asked my doctor about it once when I was a kid, like my general practitioner doctor. She had no idea. So I don't know. Am I weird, or does anyone else? Is this one of those things where I'm like, oh yeah, I get phantom smells all the time. And people are like, what? No, that's not a normal human experience. Or is it the opposite? Does anyone else out there get phantom smells that they can't identify or can't name? I don't know. But that's just, I'd truly forgotten about that until right now when I was sitting down to record this podcast episode. And I was like, oh yeah, I used to get these phantom smells. Anyways, if you have any idea what that is, if that's familiar to you at all, if you've experienced it yourself, please let me know. If I am weird, if this is my own funky thing, then, just let me have it. Ignore me. Actually, don't ignore me. Please keep coming back and listening to my podcast. All right, you guys, I think that is it for today. A little bit shorter, a little light on this one, but I enjoyed it. I hope that you did as well. I hope that you learned something new about your nose today. Please stick around for some shout outs. But thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for tuning in. I'm really enjoying making these podcast episodes. I really hope you're enjoying listening. If you want to support, any type of interaction is always helpful. Like the podcast, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review. Wherever you're listening to this, it really helps me out. Also, tell your friends if there's someone else in your life who also likes learning new things and who you think would like the podcast, or maybe you think they would like one specific episode, please share it with them. Tell them about Operation Smarty Pants. I do want this my little platform here to grow. I think it would be really cool to have a large audience, and then we can do more specific interactions. We can have conversations a little more in depth. I'm sure there's ways out there that we can do that and figure it out. So yeah, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell anyone who will listen, and then you yourself, please come back and keep listening. I will certainly be back next week with another episode. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. And I will talk to you soon. Ciao. All right, guys, time for shout outs. I only have 2 today. One shout out for Empress Zen, who left some fire emojis on last week's episode on YouTube. And shout out to Bratman, who commented on both the emoji episode and last week's Cat Facts episode. He said that he really enjoyed, he could tell that I enjoyed the Cat Facts episode. And kudos for my Star Wars and D&D references. Thank you to a fellow nerd out there. Thank you, SD Bratman, for commenting and interacting. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Empress Zen, as well. All right, that is it, guys. If you want a shout out, then please leave a comment, answer the Q&A on Spotify, or leave a review with a comment on Apple Podcasts, and I will give you a shout out in my next video podcast. I will give you a shout out in my next podcast. Until then, I will talk to you later.